I'm so glad to have Victor Lee Lewis, who is one of our trainers, does the virtual training on EFT. Victor, thank you. You are going to tell us about the secret weapon of resilience. Explain that a little bit.
Yes. Well, EFT or emotional freedom techniques is my personal secret weapon of resilience. And I'm one of those people. There are probably many thousands of us worldwide, but I'm one who would swear on a stack of Bibles that I probably would not have survived to the ripe old age of 61, where I am now, if I had not discovered EFT some 20 years ago. I had
All right.
and so, well, this is the technique. This is what it looks like. I'm just going to show you the physical technique, and after that, I'll show you how you can apply it. It has
Great.
both a physical component and a cognitive component. The physical component I will show you first, and I'd like to invite you, Louise, to just follow along with as I do tapping on a series of acupuncture meridian points. I don't wish to explain why we're using acupuncture meridian points and why tapping on meridian points is more effective than tapping on pseudo meridian points. There have been studies to this effect, but just following along and using the technique, you will be able to get the results whether you believe in meridians or not, because I didn't when I became an EFT practitioner, and whether you believe in energy psychology or energy healing does not matter. Skepticism is more than welcome, but it does require practice for effective results. And I start with the side of the hand. That's the first thing that we do, tapping continually on the side of the hand. Some EFT practitioners and trainers, you'll find it also in the literature, call this the karate chop point, but that's actually a form of tacit or implicit bias and innocent, unintentional cultural racism. So I would advise everybody to make the internal translation. First, we tap to the side of the hand, and now just going all the way up to the center line at the very top of the head, what people in the yoga world would call the crown chakra, where the three bony plates of the head come together. We tap there and 8, 10, 12 times. And there are 3 points, what I call ocular points, that are around the eye. So I would have participants just feel that there is a kind of an oval bone structure there. And on that bone, the orbital bone of the eye, there are 3 points. One beginning at the beginning of the eyebrows, the inside of the eyebrows, right where that fuzz begins, unless you have it plucked, and then you tap where the eyebrow would have been. And then tracing along the orbital bone to the side of the eye, not on the soft temple, and definitely not in the painful eye socket, because that would be so sensitive, just tapping away. The exact number of taps that you do is inconsequential. You can do 5, 6, 7. You can do 15. Most people use between 8 to 12 taps at each location. Now, tracing under the eye, close to the bridge of the nose, you're just tapping away. And you may tap as lightly as you like. If your skin is very sensitive, or you have fibromyalgia or some other kind of issue that allows, that would provoke an abreaction from this kind of touching, then you can tap very, very lightly, or even just touch and mindfully breathe. But for most people, myself especially, because I have the ADHD and it helps keep me focused to tap, I recommend tapping. Now under the nose, and now to the chin point, just below the lip and above the fleshy part of the chin, right in the sort of divot area, the little dimple. 2 more points. There's one under the arm, like if you were wearing a bra, it would be about where the pinky is, if you stick your hand in your armpit there, or where the bra strip crosses. But I would urge you to palpate or poke yourself a little bit in this area to sense where it might be exceptionally tender, because that is the precise. You're too far back, Luis.
Here?
Go from the inside the armpit, not outside, inside, and now down 4 inches, and just feel around in that area. I'm going to take my
All right. We're getting
outer
serious
garment
now.
off to make it a little bit more easy. I'm not showing off. I'm not. I'm not very impressive this way, but this is the general area. You don't want to be in the armpit, and you don't want to be too far back, but just about 4 inches down, right there. And that, yeah, I can't see where you're. Could you scoot up about 6 inches? Yeah. Or camera down?
Like there?
Yes, but
your main
yeah, along that seam is good, but your main cue will be physical. You need to feel it. You poke around a bit, and at some point you'll find an area, I think it's a little bit lower, that will be substantially tender, surprisingly tender. And if you can't find it, so let's just pretend that you're one of those people that can't find it, you just slap away under the arm in the general area. Good enough. Please don't trouble yourself. This is a very, very, very forgiving modality. I used to do the first 3 to 4 months of my practice in 2008. Skype was still a pretty new thing, and I didn't want to use it. So I never saw where I was directing my clients to tap. I sent them a tapping chart by email or fax, and they would look at the chart and then do whatever they were doing, and we got great results over and over and over. Every single client that I work with was able to get fantastic relief, sometimes from lifelong events in a single tapping session or two. The final tapping point is under the bosom. Just imagine you were 8 years old, and wherever your nipples would have been in those days, go down just to the crease of the pectoral muscle or the breast and tap right there.
Okay, you don't need to see me doing that.
No, no, no. And about the last 2 tapping points, the under the arm points and the under the bosom points, it is completely permissible for the sake of modesty, boundaries, or what have you, to drop them off altogether. I only include them because they're actually a part of the foundational system, not because they are critical. When I work with people who are very heavy or who have lots of sexual trauma, or who are very well endowed up front, they're quite busty, for the sake of simplicity, with no loss of effectiveness in the technique, you can just let those last 2 points go. Okay. So now for the cognitive part. You tap on the side of the hand again, and now we couple whatever problem we want to deal with, and with an acceptance statement. So let's say that the problem, hypothetically, is me being terrified of catching the coronavirus.
Good one.
Hypothetically. I don't know that anybody was really dealing with something like that, but I would say, even though I have this terror of catching the coronavirus, and then I would invite you to repeat after.
Even though I have this terror of catching the coronavirus.
Even though I know you probably really don't. I deeply and completely love and accept myself.
I deeply and completely love and accept myself. Okay,
if you yourself or somebody you know who might use this modality has deep self-esteem issues to the point where they could not say those words without erupting in an abreaction of protest or throwing up in their mouth, then you can say, even though I have this terrible fear of the coronavirus,
even though I have this terrible fear of the coronavirus,
I deeply and completely accept myself.
I deeply and completely accept myself.
Or I want to deeply and completely accept myself. All 3 of those work just as well.
Okay. Also for the British people who the idea of deeply loving and accepting yourself is a little bit hard to take.
Right? So to that end, I would say this is just between you and me. And no one has to know that you're not being really hard on yourself in this process. But the concept is that we're pairing an acceptance of the problem that we're targeting for change and an acceptance of ourselves. This just provides an alignment of our personal resources so that we can move through the problem without having our energy caught up in protesting the fact that we have it. After we do that acceptance statement, pairing the acceptance of the problem and acceptance of the self 3 times to drill it in deeply, then we shift to what we call the sequence, where we're using top of the head, and now we just focus on the problem. This terrible fear of catching the coronavirus.
This terrible fear of catching the coronavirus.
Eyebrow point. This fear of catching the coronavirus.
This fear of catching the coronavirus.
This fear of catching the coronavirus.
Fear of catching the coronavirus.
This fear of catching the coronavirus.
Fear of catching the coronavirus.
This fear of catching the coronavirus.
Fear of catching the coronavirus.
This fear of catching the coronavirus.
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 And bottom of the chest somewhere. Fear of catching the coronavirus.
Fear of catching the coronavirus.
And I like to end with a kind of a palate cleansing gesture that is not part of classic or clinical EFT, simply squeezing the wrist gently and briefly, taking a deep breath in, and blowing it out easy and smooth. Both the inhale and the exhale should be long and mindful, as long and mindful as you can. But the exhale should be a little bit longer because that stimulates parasympathetic nervous system activation.
I have a question. So I don't think we did this part, did we, when we first went through it?
Maybe, I forgot.
Does it matter? Like,
the beautiful thing is that even if I did forget, and even if you went and taught somebody the whole protocol skipping this, it would still work because of the redundancy of tapping so many different points. But let's go through it uninterrupted, without commentary, making sure that we catch all the points. Even though I have this problem, let's just call it problem.
Even though I have this problem,
I deeply and completely accept myself.
I deeply and completely accept myself.
Even though I have this problem,
even though I have this problem,
I deeply and completely love and accept myself.
I deeply and completely love and accept myself.
Or the third variant, even though I have this problem,
even though I have this problem,
I want to deeply and completely accept myself.
I want to deeply and completely love and accept myself.
You could even say, I would deeply and completely accept myself if I didn't suck so badly. But what it does is it confounds the self-rejection that is associated with the problem. Now, I said I was going to avoid commentary. I didn't. This problem.
This problem.
Top of the head. This problem. Eyebrow point.
This problem.
Side of the eye. This problem.
This problem.
Under the eye. This problem.
This problem.
Under the nose. This problem.
This problem.
Chin point. This problem.
This problem.
Collarbones. This problem.
This problem.
Under the arm. One or both sides. This problem.
This problem.
And sometimes we call it the liver point because it's on the liver meridian at the crease of the pectoral muscle. This problem.
This problem.
And then a smooth draw of breath in. Easy long exhale. And peace.
Okay. So that's the technique. Can you tell us, do you know why it works?
I know. I have pretty good theories about why it works. And the explanations that were offered to me when I learned EFT did not satisfy me. We're balancing the acupuncture meridians. That confounds me. It drives me crazy. I don't know what that means, especially since I didn't believe in meridians in the first place. So I studied somatic experiencing. I did lots of social neuroscience reading, trauma neuroscience reading, people like Daniel Siegel and Peter Levine, Bessel van der Kolk, one of your speakers. And what I learned from them is that, comparative studies between the results of EFT and EMDR suggest that every time we stimulate the acupuncture meridian points, we trigger the release of serotonin and endorphins and opioids that are begin to gently flood the bloodstream. They're not targeted toward any particular area, but those resourceful neuropeptides are beginning to enter the body, and already, without even the cognitive component, begins to settle down the threat response, or the fight-flight sympathetic activation. Another mode of action is the triggering of delta waves, which has been a key focus in the work of the Havening technique with Kate Truitt. Is that right?
Yeah, Kate is our trainer for the Havening techniques, yes.
And I have received 3 days of training from her on the Havening technique, and highly, highly recommend it. It's a great adjunct. Some people are going to get along a lot better with the Havening technique, and some people will get along better with tapping, but they have a somewhat similar mechanism of action, and Havening was developed by the Rudin brothers, a dentist and a medical doctor, who were asked by the hypnotherapist in England, Paul McKenna, how does this EFT thing work? So when they went through their various medical journals, they came up with a theory on this, and developed their own technique as a result. But there's an overlap. So delta waves is another, and this is also found in the work of EMDR as well. When you do bilateral stimulation, either the butterfly hug or bilateral visual stimulation, you're going to be triggering delta waves, which happen in deep sleep. So I believe that one mechanism of action is that whenever you have stress or traumatic stress in particular, you're looking at an indigestion of the nervous system. Our brains metabolize experience the way our stomachs metabolize food. If there's too much experience, if the experience is too intense, if it's too harsh, or if it's too protracted, then our brain, if you will, our nervous system gets indigested. It gets flooded, and that is what we commonly recognize as trauma, which is Peter Levine of the somatic experiencing movement suggests that the human psyche, the human organism, is capable of metabolizing an experience of any level of intensity if it has enough time to do it. And how do you have enough time to metabolize intense experience? You do that essentially by slowing down. And there is a paradox in the slowing down that we do with Havening, and the slowing down that we do with EFT, and then even some of the slowing down that we do with EMDR. But the people who have developed this sensibility to the most refined degree, I think, are in the somatic experiencing movement and sensory motor psychotherapy. So we slow down, and we touch the traumatic material, and then we step away from it. We we lean into the stressor, and then we lean away from it. We don't run away from it in a panic. We just step forward to where it's a little intense, and then we step back to where we feel more resourceful. And that is a process that we call pendulation. In somatic experiencing, we do it verbally through the gentle guidance of the coach. In EFT, it's kind of built into the process. Uh, so we're titrating, that is limiting the amount of the total intensity of a problem, like an armed robbery, for example. I've worked with several people who have survived armed robberies, and you don't want to take on the whole experience at once. You take on a teeny tiny corner of it and let the nervous system get used to the idea that it can live and be resourceful while handling that tiny chunk. And it requires a certain level of sophistication if you're using a technique like EMDR, or if you're using somatic experiencing or neuro-linguistic programming, NLP. But with EFT tapping, a lot of the things that are really important to do that typically takes an expert level of skill and attention to accomplish, it is automatically built into the process. We're automatically titrating the intensity of traumas. We're automatically pendulating between more stressful states and more resourceful states. And we're dividing and conquering the problem into smaller pieces so that we can bring all of our resourcefulness to a small part of the problem, then all of our resourcefulness to another small part of the problem, then all of our resourcefulness to yet another part of the problem. And surprisingly, if we take that patient, slow-going, initially kind of homeopathic approach, just a little bit of the poison to work with to make a medicine. We actually move through the traumas very, very quickly. So
I have so many questions, Victor.
I will stop now.
Can I just, yeah. So for people who maybe don't know, serotonin and endorphins, those are all things that calm our system.
Right.
That put us in a more relaxed state. And you're also talking about the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the opposite of the part of our nervous system that gets all activated when we're in fight and flight.
Exactly.
And so that all makes sense. And I have a couple of questions. One of them is, so there's another response that we can go into with trauma, which is the freeze response, which is like the parasympathetic nervous system. If you know Stephen Porges' work, it's like the old system that actually goes beyond calming us down and puts us in a state of collapse or freeze or numbness. Does EFT work for that too?
It works very, very, very well for that dorsal vagal response. So, and one quibble that I would have, which I have gotten some clarity from Stephen Porges himself, having sat with him in some trainings, is that the freeze collapse response is not part of the fight-flight response. The freeze collapse is what happens when on a intuitive level, the organism assesses that fight or flight will be of no avail. Then, another word I use is implode. We just kind of fall apart. We might go numb. We might leave our bodies. So here's what we do with it. And when someone is in what we would call the toxic parasympathetic response, or the freeze, collapse, numbness response, we would say, I'll just model how I would tap with somebody about that. Even though I have all this numbness and can't even feel the intensity of what I went through, I deeply and completely love and accept myself. And we would say that 3 times, and then just tap this numbness, this freeze response, this numbness, this freeze response, this numbness. Focusing mindfully on the problem of the toxic freeze itself, it will tend, in my experience, and I've been working with clients now for probably 13 years, and it took me a couple of years to understand what I was seeing. EFT doesn't theorize or talk about the freeze response very much and how to work with it using tapping, so I explored it and experimented with it and read the work of the more neuroscience savvy people who have a handle on this, and I found that just targeting that freeze numbness response itself is enormously helpful. What usually happens within 1 or 2 rounds of tapping on the numbness is that the grief, the terror, the anger that may be underneath it begin to surface. And
okay, good. Can I ask you a question then? Because
yes.
we're talking about a technique. You're obviously very experienced and very knowledgeable. What about people might be thinking, is this safe to do at home, kind of thing? And what if those emotions start to arise and you're doing this with your partner or, you know, a friend or something? What happens then?
I would say use it for first aid. Use it with family and friends that you have a relationship of trust with, but don't try to be your partner, your sibling, your mother's therapist. I would, and the way Gary Craig, who started EFT, describes it is stay in your lane. If you're not a therapist, don't try to play one on TV unless you're actually on TV.
All right, another question.
But you can be very helpful. Rather than try to find the right language to tap with people, I would propose just tapping without using words at all. And what I would do with someone who was flooded, if they were a family member, if they were a complete stranger and I had their permission to be of service to them, I would say, just tap here or just tap here, look at me and tap here like I'm doing, do what I'm doing, and you're gonna be okay. So there are 2 things that you can do without expertise that will help enormously. 1, regulate yourself as much as you can. That is the single most useful gift that you could give to another person in trouble. And if you add on top of, okay, I've got myself anchored in as good a state as I can be under the circumstances, but I'm being very deliberate and intentional about this so that I can be of service. I'm not just crossing my hands and being hopeful. I'm saying, Victor, bring your best self to the table here. This is about the child. This is about the elder. This is about the person who just fell off their bicycle and broke their leg. It's not about me. So I get myself in as grounded and resourceful a state as possible, and essentially, in my imagination, I create a bubble which includes myself and the person that I'm trying to help, so that they can intuitively, and all birds and mammals will do this. They don't need schooling, and we don't need New Age metaphors in order to understand it. Mammals and birds are social creatures, and when distressed, they take comfort in trusted kin. And human beings are capable of flexibly offering that quality of relationship universally and across the board. So I put myself out to people that way every time I do a session, anchor myself in my own positive state, and then say, tap along with me. And as they tap, they will become more regulated. It becomes easier and easier for their nervous system to recalibrate to mine. I'm not going to recalibrate to theirs. Just because
Mm.
you're flooded doesn't mean I need to be flooded. And I would say out of 13 years of professional work, I've probably gotten sucked into a client's material about 3 times because I tap along with people that I'm working with, and because I have an internal emotional stance that if you have fallen down the well, I'm not going to jump down the well with you to hand you a rope. I'm going to lower it to you and pull you up. So we need to practice holding that kind of stance when we're working with people who seem to be in a less resourceful state than our own. We work on ourselves while we're helping them by tapping along and doing our modeling, and we just courageously stand in the conviction that I will stay solid and resourceful so that I can help others to up-level their own resilience.
Well, this is going to be enormously helpful to people right now in the world as we're going through this pandemic. And I can see that you could quite easily talk for more than 4 hours, which is the amount of time that we have created the virtual training. And I was going to ask you about your own story, but I think we should keep this short and then invite people to sign up for your virtual training, where obviously you will be going into these things a
Yes.
lot more deeply.
And I very much look forward to it. May I talk about some of the range of uses of EFT?
Yeah, let's.
We did, and I hope we can isolate the stage demonstration that I did with the acupuncturist in the LA training last year, because I stepped out on faith in that particular instance, but I've done it dozens of times and never fallen flat. I asked a man who had a whopping toothache. He needed a root canal, and he was in the training sort of holding his jaw, but he couldn't even hold his jaw because it was too painful to actually touch it. So he was kind of going, "It's a ha ha," and 0 to 10, how much pain? It was a 9. And I said, "I want to help you. I don't know if it'll work. I may make a fool of myself, but I have seen this work so many times. I'm going to act on the confidence of past experience. Would you come up?" Didn't touch him. We maintained social distance through the entire demo. I just said, "Just do what I do and say what I say, and let's see what happens." And I would say that based on my recollection, I haven't seen the video recently, that we did perhaps a dozen rounds of tapping, maybe over a 5 or 6, 7 minute period. And in that time, he went from unbearable pain where he kind of needed to keep a certain distance from his own face to pressing into his jaw, trying to find where the unbearable pain was. So EFT is exquisite as physical pain trauma first aid. If you have undiagnosed pain syndromes, doctors, chiropractors, neurologists, and physical therapists have had their way with you and can't explain why you're still having the pain. When I hear those stories, I go, let's do tapping on that, because my experience has been far more often than not, what is confounding, if there's no MRI or PET scan or X-ray to explain the pain, and we tap on it, it typically will shift very, very quickly and in an enduring way. Then there's things like allergies. I used to have hay fever. I sat down the first day of hay fever season, literally, I think it was probably 2008, and I sneezed, and my partner asked me if I needed vitamin C or wellness formula, some hippie cold medications. And I said, no, it's just allergies. And she said, oh, you can tap on that. And I went, yes, I've never done it before, but I'd love to try it. I sat there like Buddha under the Bodhi tree and said, I'm not leaving this chair until I no longer have hay fever. And I tapped like a maniac for 30 minutes. My sinuses dried up, and I haven't had hay fever since, and that's been about 12 years. It's pretty good for emotional issues. I would say outstanding for emotional issues, especially for episodic upsets. Like if you feel fine and then something happens, somebody cuts you off in traffic, or your ice cream falls off the ice cream cone, and those events and shock traumas, sudden injuries, heartbreaking events of any sort. Tapping is really, really good for those if we use it. Now, the biggest barrier to using it on severe upsets of that nature is that our habitual mind will typically, I wouldn't say sometimes, I wouldn't say often, I would say usually it will dismiss the use of the technique as something that couldn't possibly work. And if we can overcome, and I consider that to be a soft version of the freeze response. So we sort of have to overcome an internal resistance or an internal freeze to applying the technique. Even if we feel skeptical, I say the skepticism is no barrier to the effectiveness of EFT, but not using it is. Mm-hmm. If you want to learn something fast, and I studying for an exam, trying to perfect your golf swing or your foul shot, learning, any kind of peak performance enhancement. Like if you want to be on your game when you enter the emergency room over and over and over again, you can use EFT. Although that is a bit of a specialized technique. I will address it in the training if people would like to have that, and I suspect they would. How to use tapping for peak performance. You will find, if you check on the internet, professional basketball players, professional football players, and other elite athletes, track stars, Olympians, internationally, are using this technique as a secret weapon for performance enhancement. And I helped my son up his LSAT score from 90th percentile to 98th percentile using EFT peak performance techniques. And it's pretty much the same as what I've already shown you. You aim at, even though I only got a 90 on this test and I want a 99, I deeply and completely love and accept myself. Or even though I get choked up on the math part of the test, I deeply and completely accept myself. It downregulates the stress for approaching the topic, freeing up creativity and resourcefulness, and it again functions as a secret weapon that nobody actually has to know about except for you.
I have one last question, Victor, which is when you're talking about the narrative part, it seems to be focused on problems. Is it also useful for focusing maybe on aspirational things?
Yes. There are 3 modes of tapping. And one of my teachers, EFT master Lindsay Kinney, developed this technique. She calls it the Golden Gate technique. If you're using the SUDS intensity scale, where you measure pain or discomfort on a 0 to 10 scale, if that discomfort is 8, 9, 10, we are only advised to, or even 7, just tap on the problem. Once it subsides to about a 6 or 7, then like 4 to 7, I would advise aspirational tapping. So even though I have this this terrible embarrassment about speaking in front of people I deeply and completely love and accept myself, once that embarrassment or the stage fright gets down to about a 7, then I will say, even though I still have some of this stage fright and butterflies in my stomach, I want to be able to address a group of people with all of my mind and all of my heart, with words flowing freely, without even having to think about it. And I would tap in those aspirations. I just want to be able to speak my mind. I just want to be able to let people know what's in my heart. I just want to reach across time and distance and make a difference in other people's lives by how I use my words. And once that stress intensity subsides to about a 3 to a 4, then we can start dropping in affirmations. You may have heard many skeptics say affirmations don't work, and they're right. Affirmations don't work if you try to lay it on top of a buttload of trauma. Then you're faking yourself. Then we're pretending. It's not faking it till you make it. It is an attempt at what's sometimes called a spiritual or emotional bypass. The time to claim the aspiration is when you're no longer flooded, but you're still activated, but you can at least imagine feeling a lot better. And the time to embrace or choose the affirmative is so I had a self-deprecation crisis one time in 2008, and I tap on the problem for a while. And at some point, I said, even though I have this desire to beat myself up, I choose to love myself with tender reverence, whether I deserve it or not. And I added the whether I deserve it or not in order to mobilize my natural defiance. Being a kind of a defiant person, I'm flipping my defiance against my self-deprecation. Does that make sense? You can use it.
And you clearly have overcome the speaking in public, and because you are so well able to communicate your mind and your heart. And I hope people will take part in your longer training. Thank you so much for giving us a preview and some of these really handy tips, Victor.